It's All Her, the podcast. I'm your host, Jordy Lucas. I'm the founder and editor of It's All Her. I was an actress in a previous life and I'm a mum to a toddler. I've got a lot going on and I have a passion for helping women live simpler, better lives. Now, usually each week I recap what's happened on itsallher.com, but I'm not going to be doing that this week because I have something I want to talk about. And I put this out to all of you on my personal Instagram, and you guys wanted to talk about it too. So the last few weeks there have been a few little instances where celebrities and influencers have behaved questionably online and have suffered the consequences. And I think it's really interesting and important that we talk about their behaviour and how we deal with it. So firstly, Nadia Bartel was filmed breaking lockdown rules, snorting a white powdered substance off a Kmart plate. I don't know why the Kmart plate is relevant, but it's been reported heavily, so I thought I should pass that on to you as well. And then Georgia Love put up a story on her Instagram, which was incredibly offensive to the Asian community. I also want to just say before I go on, it's not up to us if you are not of Asian descent. It's not up to us to decide what is and isn't offensive. I've seen so many comments online from white people saying that, you know, it's just a joke, people need to lighten up. It's not up to us to police what is and isn't offensive to the Asian community. And this also goes for any marginalized group or the LGBT plus community or any other cultural group. It's just not appropriate for us to decide what is and isn't offensive to them. We need to be guided by them on what's appropriate. Anyway, so I posted about this on my personal Instagram stories and opened it up to you all to give me some of your thoughts on this. And I actually had some really interesting chats with some of you. And I guess mainly my thoughts and questions were around cancel culture. You know, should these people be losing everything because of one mistake, just because they're in the public eye? Should we be harsher on these people because they have a public profile and there's a responsibility that comes with that? And I think after chatting with some of you, I sort of firmed up my opinions on this. And I really believe that if someone wants to profit off having a public profile, then they also need to be prepared to suffer the consequences of poor behaviour publicly. You know, you can't just flick a switch on fame. And if you choose to live your life in a public way, then you need to accept the highs and the lows with that. In no way am I condoning, trolling and anything like that. But I think you need to be prepared to be held accountable for the poor choices. And especially these two women have made some poor choices. And unfortunately, the nature of their work in the industry is that they're going to have to deal with the fallout in a public way. You know, with Nadia Bartel, I think it's an unfortunate one where I know lots of people have been breaking lockdown rules and measures, and I think it's just unfortunate. It is a poor choice on her behalf, but it is unfortunate that she's just, copying the brunt of it because she's been filmed and it's been released publicly, because I know lots of people who have, flouted the rules. The snorting of the white powder, I mean, is it really any of our business what she does in her personal life? Probably not. But if she's making poor choices and breaking public health measures, then, yes, hold her accountable. Absolutely. The Georgia Love thing, I just don't know how someone could be so foolish. She posted this apology sort of saying that she didn't realize that she was making an offensive joke, which already I find pretty unbelievable. But then, this is the power of the internet, is that when you post something, it is there forever. Someone found a post that she had made in 2013, making a joke along the same lines. So she absolutely knew there was a link there. and that what she was posting was offensive. I actually have a theory that she meant to only send it to personal friends but accidentally made it public. That's just my opinion, because I don't see how she could have thought that that was appropriate, especially working in the media. And then, of course, she lost her on-air presenting role with Channel 7. Some people have said that this was unjust or uncalled for. I personally think it's a pretty fitting punishment. One of my followers actually pointed out that if a quote unquote normal person posted something like this or made a comment like this in a normal workplace, that there would be, consequences, HR would get involved, and perhaps, yes, you would be stood down. And it just so happens that when you're a public figure, that it doesn't really stop at HR. It's the whole public that is aware of your behaviour and the fallout from it. Georgia Love's management have since come out saying that their main priority now is supporting Georgia because the trolls are now out in full force. And I completely believe that she would be receiving some pretty awful messages in her inbox at the moment. But I also believe that some people would just be straight up holding her accountable. And again, that is what comes with having a public profile, is that people can message you and tell you their opinions and hold you accountable when you've done something like this. And I think that that is a real theme that I've noticed with influencers lately, that when they say something that's questionable or they share an opinion that people don't agree with and people hold them accountable for that, that is then considered to be trolling. And I think there's a real difference between being held accountable when you're a public figure and being trolled. I know that there's some anti-vax influencers who I'm not even going to name on here that are throwing around, cease and desist letters and suing people left, right and centre because their views are being shared, and they're now being told that their views aren't necessarily resonating with many people. That's not trolling. That's, people just, being held accountable. If you want to talk more about this, I'm going to put up a post in our private Facebook group. Or, of course, you can send me a DM because I am, loving having these chats with you guys. It's really interesting. Let's get to this week's guest. Magdalena Roze had a thriving media career and was a staple presenter at Channel 10 when she decided to give it away and move her family to Byron Bay. We talk about her childhood as a refugee, how she carved out her successful media career, and so much more. Here's my chat with Magdalena Roze. Magdalena Roze, thank you so much for joining us this week on the podcast. I'm very excited to hear all about your media career and your sea change. How is lockdown going in Byron Bay?
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to have something to do. No, I'm only kidding. But it's such a pleasure to be on your podcast. So thank you for having me. And look, lockdown is going okay. I think we're pretty grateful that we haven't been in lockdown. There are people that have had it far worse than us in Sydney and Melbourne. So I'm really conscious about that. And we've got a bit of space here as well. Just in general, I feel like we're not sort of as cooped up. We just sort of hang out in the garden and go for walks and just try and keep things, I guess, as normal as possible. I mean, our kind of strategy for coping with things, because we're in an industry, my partner mainly in hospitality, where that has been severely impacted by the lockdowns and by COVID. So I think, like, as we speak, we've got 7 out of 8 restaurants in lockdown. There are so many people that are affected by this, like our staff, our suppliers. Like, there's a real ripple effect.
Yeah.
We really feel the weight of that and having that responsibility. But we try not to think about it too much. I mean, as in we do what we need to do, but we don't sort of dwell on, I guess, the more negative parts of it all too much, because it's out of our control. So we just sort of approach each task as we need to do it, and then we really try not to think about it and just appreciate the fact that we do have more time together as a family. It is actually kind of nice not having as many decisions to make on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I was even saying to Daz, like, there are real, apart from the work stuff, life stuff, like there's no decisions to make. Like there's no one to meet, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do. And it's actually really nice, like, that the only real decision of the day is like, what are we having for dinner?
For dinner, I know. I call my fiance at like 9 o'clock in the morning when I'm walking down to the shops being like, what do you want for dinner? He's like, it's 9 o'clock. Well, I was like, but there's nothing else to do.
Yes. My son asked me like probably about 8 o'clock this morning. He said, so what are we having for dinner tonight? I'm like, I know, we really need to start planning because it's the major event of the day.
Oh gosh. How are your kids coping?
They're okay. I have to say that they're only little. They're 3 and 5.
Yeah.
So for them, they're sort of, I would say they're sort of blissfully unaware. I mean, they see people in masks and they think it's a bit sort of weird and random.
Yeah.
But their little lives are relatively unchanged because we kind of don't do all that much anyway in our normal lives. So, we still go for our morning coffee, but it's just takeaway. We still do our walks and plays on the beach or riding our bikes. It's sort of, and they don't, I mean, I don't know if you're supposed to homeschool that age, but I'm not.
Yeah.
So like, I'm definitely not. I'm like, they'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I'm not really homeschooling or anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've just sort of taken the easy approach because I feel like there's a lot in terms of like, working from home, all the cleaning, all the cooking. And then if on top of that, you've got to be a teacher as well, which so many parents have to be. I don't know how they do it. No. I've just let that one go by the wayside. And I'm like, if you want to play Lego all day, you can play Lego all day. All good.
So tell me about your sort of early life, your aspirations as a young woman, and perhaps how you got your start as a journalist and a meteorologist.
Mm-hmm. So I've always, I guess, even at school, I was always fairly ambitious. Like I didn't get pushed by my parents at all. If anything, they were kind of the opposite and always told my sister not to stress out. But I put it on myself, and I'm really not sure where that comes from. But well, I know some of it. I know where some of it comes from. To cut a long story short, we came here as refugees in the early 1980s, and my parents have always been very, very hardworking and very, very grateful for the opportunities that this country has given us. Yeah. And that's something that I've always been aware of. And I've always thought, well, they've made such big sacrifices to be here that I owe it, even though they've never expected it. I've always sort of felt like I owe it to them and the experience to make the most of it. Yeah. And also because I started school and I couldn't speak English, there was a little bit of shame around that. And so I really tried, I really tried to learn English as fast as I could as a kid. Like I still remember it even as early as that. And to do my best at school so that I wouldn't sort of be left behind. And I always sort of felt like, well, my dad said it anyway. He said, it doesn't matter how much money you have, education is everything, So I loved performing. I was always really entranced, by theatre and the arts. I knew that I wanted to do something on that level. And I had a little bit of a crossroads when I was finishing school. It was like a choice of, do I go to, because I loved acting, and I thought, do I do acting or do I go to university and do journalism? Like very different careers, both in the media. And so it was a real crossroads because all of my friends went on to do acting, and they all went to NIDA. Wow. And I was one of the only ones that chose the safer option. In my head, that was like the more rational, safe option. Yeah. And I went to university. So, which I've never regretted, by the way, but I've always sort of wondered, what would have happened, But still, so I went to university and studied media and communication. And then in my final year, we had the opportunity to do an internship. And my dream was to work at Getaway. I think everyone's dream at that time was Getaway.
Anybody who has a passion for presenting, it's either Getaway.
Or media. It was always Getaway. Getaway was like the show. And I was like, I just want to work on Getaway. And I landed the internship there. And of course I said to myself, right, once I'm in there, I'm going to work so hard so that they give me any job at all. So I did my internship, and then I stayed on there for like quite a long time. I was sort of in the research department, and then
Yeah.
I worked at Sydney Getaway in the research department there as well. And then constantly, I was doing a lot of the boring stuff,
Mm.
having to watch all the tapes, having to shot list all the stuff that nobody else wanted to do, but I was just happy to be there.
Yeah.
And but I was watching all these guys like in Africa and Katrina, like around, going all around Italy, and I was seeing all the tapes,
Mm.
but I mean like hours and hours of tapes before they were edited.
Yeah,
And it was a
right.
real learning experience for me, not only from a producing point of view, but from a presenting point of view, because I would see all the takes. I would see how these guys are doing it, like on the ground, and how they approach the way they do things. And I was just taking mental notes the whole time,
Yeah.
but also just thinking, God, I want to go to these places myself.
And so how did you start at Channel 10?
Yeah, so when I was overseas, and when I decided to sort of stay on in London,
Mm.
I was lucky because I ended up getting a job as a researcher on a travel show that was broadcast on the BBC at the time.
Yeah.
It was awesome. So I felt really lucky to be working in telly over there, and I
Yeah.
did that for a couple of years. I came back to Sydney after that, and then I went straight back to Channel 9 with my Getaway people. And then I worked on a number of different shows, always on the other side, as in on the production side. By then, I was associate producer.
Yeah,
And I
wow.
remember my boss at the time said to me, "You really should be in front of the camera." And I wasn't sure
Yeah.
whether that was a compliment or whether she just thought I was a really bad producer. But
I
either
need you
way,
out.
I was like, "Oh, right, okay." And she would see me doing things like I would stay back in the night
Yeah.
playing. One of the editors was my friend, and I would just film, like I would interview like family members about all sorts of things, like just random things, like about their refugee experience or about like
Mm.
all sorts of stuff. And me and my editor friend would stay back in the night and just play around cutting these things together for no particular reason.
Yeah.
My boss was there one night. She had a look and she said, "You know what? Have you got any more of this kind of stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, there's
Mm.
like heaps, but it's terrible. That's why I would never show you." And she said, "No,
Yeah.
no, take it out, because tomorrow all of us on this show," and at the time I was working on a show called Things to Try Before You Die. It was like another travel show. She said,
Yeah.
"Well, the whole team is going to make a show reel for you." And
Oh, wow.
it was so amazing. And so the producers and the editors, like everybody got together that day and just helped me put all these things that I'd been filming into a show reel. And then she said, "Okay," and we did it. And then
Yeah.
she said, "Okay, now what's your dream job?" And I said, "National Geographic."
Yeah,
And
wow.
she's like, "Right, well, let's send it." So I sent this little show reel to National Geographic Channel. And then the guy called me a week later. And then I got a job at National Geographic Channel. And
Oh
I
my
started
God.
to do like really cool stuff because I love
Mm.
the subject matter on Nat Geo. I love the fact that there's science and politics and history and environment. Like there's, from a journalism point of view, it's extremely interesting,
Yeah.
doing all this stuff around the natural world. And I loved it. And I was doing a lot of weather and climate stories,
Hmm.
and Nat Geo was housed within the whole Foxtel building. And
Yeah.
so I kind of caught wind of the Weather Channel, and I thought, "Oh, that's a channel I'd love to do because I love the weather side of
Mm.
things." So I started to dip my toe into the Weather Channel guys and sort of say that I want to do a bit of stuff with them. So I ended up getting a gig with them, but I realized that I really need to know more. And
Yeah.
so that's when I went back to university to study atmospheric science, because I wanted to make sure that the information that I was presenting, that I had a deep understanding of it,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
also that I could be accountable for my own forecasts, because I kind of course, I trust the Bureau of Meteorology, but there was a part of me that didn't want to just regurgitate, what was on
Mm.
the website. I wanted to actually understand what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And so after sort of almost 4 or 5 years at the Weather Channel and studying, I left, and then Channel 10 was starting a breakfast show, and I was doing little bits for Channel 10 while I was at Weather Channel anyway, so we were
Yeah.
aware of each other. They offered me a job there, and that's how I started at Channel 10.
And so you've obviously had such a varied career as a journalist. What were some of the highlights for you?
Oh God, there's so many things that I've loved working on. Like at Channel 10, I had so many wonderful opportunities. I got to do 2 Olympic Games. I did the Summer
Wow.
Olympics in London and the Winter Olympics in Sochi in Russia, which was just so bizarre. Because, it's funny because I think back to that and it was a bit lockdownish, like because we were all in this like enclosure and you weren't allowed to get out.
Oh
and,
my
there was,
God.
and it was so policed as to like who could get a ticket to things and whatever. It's actually funny looking back. I'm like, wow, it kind of feels like it was a bit lockdown. And then I got to do the Grand Prix coverage and also compete in the celebrity race, like before the actual Formula One, which was an unbelievable experience. And just, I filled in a lot on the project for Carrie while I was at 10. And that was an awesome experience too, because you're always interviewing so many interesting people, whether it's politician or ordinary folk doing interesting things or, celebrities. It's such a varied show.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed doing that. So Channel 10 was, but I mean, even at the Weather Channel, a lot of the weather events that we've had over the last few years, and they're not positive things, but everything from the bushfires to these major cyclones that we've had, as from a meteorological and journalistic point of view, they've been very interesting to cover.
Yeah. You achieved so much and loved your job. Why did you sort of make that choice to step away and move your family to Byron?
Yeah, it's a funny one. But I guess at the time that I left, I had been doing early mornings for about 7 years. So between Weather Channel and Channel 10, I'd been waking up at 3:30 a.m. for about 7 years.
Yeah,
and,
right. It takes its toll.
It takes its toll, and I wasn't going to sleep at 7:30. I was still going to events in the evening.
Yeah.
I was still flying to Melbourne to, say, host the project after something like that, and then coming back home at 11 p.m. and then still waking up at 3:30. And of course, when I was at the Weather Channel, I was studying. So I think it really started to have a physical and mental toll.
Yeah.
And then, so I think I was already sort of 1 foot out because I didn't think I could sustain that.
Yeah, right.
And then my partner got the opportunity to open a restaurant on a farm, and he's a chef, and that was like a chef's dream. And it's funny because I didn't think twice about it. Like as soon as he told me about that, I thought, God, that is amazing. You can open a restaurant on a farm in Byron Bay. Like we have to do it. And it was the decision had to be made fast. And it's probably good that I didn't give it too much thought, because if I had, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Yeah,
but instead,
right.
we just went, yep, let's do it. And then worried about the details later, which involved leaving my job. And it's probably a good thing I didn't think too much about it, because I don't know if I would have done it,
Yeah. So did you experience like a bit of a loss of identity walking away and having this huge change of scenery, but also, not having your work anymore?
Yeah, initially I didn't, because the excitement of just the fact that it was all a bit like on a whim,
Yeah.
and we were moving from Sydney to Byron Bay. And I kind of didn't think it would be so permanent. Like I was imagining that it might be a year.
Yeah.
And so I sort of imagined that there'd be a lot of back and forth. So I think that sort of made it easier in a way.
Yeah.
But I must say that after a few months of living here, when the penny kind of dropped that we were here and I wasn't working in the same way that I used to and doing what I love, because even now, like TV is still one of my great loves.
Yeah.
I must say, I went through a bit of an identity crisis, because I thought, God, like, what have I done with my life? Like, because I've just explained like how hard I worked at school.
Yeah.
I really, really worked for this thing. And I was like, what have I done? Like, have I thrown away all these years of working and studying, just to, as nice as it is up here, like, what am I really doing or contributing? And so there was that. The funny thing is as well that, a lot of my self-esteem was tied up in my job too. Like, I felt proud of what I was doing. Like it gave me purpose, financial independence.
Yeah.
So I lost that. And this is a good thing, but, at the time it's good because it's humbling, but, no one asks you what you do. Right. So suddenly it's like, when I was in Sydney, everyone was like, so what do you do? Or they knew what I did. But here, no one cared, like ever. you know? And at first it's like, why doesn't anyone care? It's actually really good, because it means, you know what? maybe I need to like fill in some of the other gaps that I just haven't even had a chance to have a look at. And so I sort of went through all those feelings, and then I went, you know what? I have this opportunity now to do something different and to fulfill other passions. Even though I love television and weather and everything I was doing, that's not all I like. They're not the only facets of who I am. And so I sort of sat down and thought, what else? What do I really love? Okay, I love writing. I love food, travel, and lifestyle. And so I thought, okay, and I was meeting so many interesting people here and producers and through setting up the restaurant and even sort of wellness practitioners, because that side of things here is so big. So I thought I'm going to start sharing some of this stuff on a blog just for fun, and I'll see where it goes. And at the time, so that was maybe 7 or 8 years ago, people really took to it. And a year after that, a publisher approached me to turn it into a book. And then everything sort of took off from there. And it's interesting because I never thought, like, I absolutely love what I'm doing now. It's kind of hard to explain sometimes what I do because it's so varied. Like, it's everything from, recipe writing to hosting events to interviewing chefs and whatnot at different festivals. But sometimes I'm the one doing the cooking demonstrations. But it's really cool, and I just feel really grateful that that it's kind of worked out that way.
Yeah. And a lot of your work now has such an emphasis on sort of natural living, being kind to the environment. Do you think that perhaps the work that you did as a journalist and as a meteorologist sort of had an impact on that because you had a firsthand experience and you saw sort of how we've damaged the environment?
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that, like, I remember when I was a kid at primary school, I was the president of the conservation club, and we were doing veggie gardens and stuff back at primary school. Like, I've always had a real sort of interest, an affinity for the environment, and definitely, as you said, like through my work, I for sure saw so many of the impacts, real impacts of weather and climate change, and definitely coming up here then and sort of living it a bit more. So it sort of it creeps up on you. It wasn't like I was sort of chasing the sustainability, even though it's something I deeply care about. It happens, I don't know, but it seems to have happened a bit more naturally here because the connection, even just from a restaurant point of view, like the connection with producers is so much deeper. I mean, the restaurant is on a working farm. So you're like forced to think differently about the way that you do things. Most of the food that we source is either from there or the farmers market or whatever. So you start to think about that, and even just things being seasonal. So, the certain foods that you're used to aren't available all the time. One of the first houses that we lived in had a rainwater tank, and then the grey water would go and out into the garden. So, for example, like, I really had to think about what I was cleaning the house with or what products I was using, because it went into the grey water, which went into the plants. So if I was using bleach and stuff, like, I would have killed the garden. So I had to just practical things, it wasn't like I was sort of trying to chase a certain message. It was literally just out of practicality that these things sort of crept up on me. And then when I fell pregnant, I really started to question more deeply, like, it's funny how, like, you don't really care about yourself as much, baby, like, why didn't I care about that before? Like, I should care about myself too. But I started to think about, what's going on my skin, and what are the cleaning products in the house. And I'm definitely not perfect in this way. I have to definitely just.
No one is though, but we all just do.
Just trying our best, So I think all of those things have contributed.
It's so funny that you say that, because I had my daughter 2 years ago, and all of the nasty chemicals got thrown out when I had her. But why did I not care about what I was using before that? It is funny, isn't it?
It is. It's really interesting, but it must be some kind of instinct, And I think, I'm not sure if this happened to you, but my sense of smell became really heightened.
Yes.
So suddenly, like, you really smell those chemicals, and they become intolerable. So it's that too. It's like your body's saying, "Whoa, like, maybe that's not okay." And then you realize, man, like, we have been surrounded by this stuff our whole life, and it's just normal, and it sort of shouldn't be.
No. Did you find that you sort of started taking better care of yourself more as well, or had you always sort of been healthy?
I definitely started taking better care of myself. I've always, I've always been conscious about, what I put in my body or whatever, but I was just much more mindful. Like, what am I eating? Where does it come from? Just because you know that your baby's getting it.
Hi there, it's Jordy here. If you're loving hearing about Magdalena Roze's media career, you might like to tune into my chat with Channel 7 sports reporter Emma Vosti. Emma shares how she went from publicist to presenter and now covers some of the biggest sporting events in the country. I'll leave the link in the show notes. Let's get back to my chat with Magdalena Roze. How does your natural lifestyle translate into, say, the beauty products that you use?
Yeah, so like I mainly started to think about this stuff. Actually, no, even when I was on telly, because I remember when I was wearing really heavy makeup, and I started to get a lot of irritation from doing that every day. And I said to Daz, gosh, what do I do? Like, and he said, well, stop putting crap on your face. And I said, I can't, because it's my job. I have to put crap on my face to be on screen. And he said, well, what about what you're doing at home? And so then I thought about, okay, makeup I can't control, but I can control the products at home. And I'd never really thought about what was in them. And so for the first time, I started to sort of think a little bit more about the products that I was using on my face. And then certainly when I was pregnant with Archie for the first time, I was thinking about, much more, I guess, sort of natural choices when it comes to my beauty, the things that I'm using around the home, cleaning products. So it's something that sort of crept up on me over the last few years. And yeah, I guess I'm sort of looking at beauty products that are not only good for the skin, but are good for the planet as well.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why I partnered with Nivea's Naturally Good range recently. And I was actually really excited to partner with them, especially, I'm almost 40 years old. So I was like, wow, who would have thought I'd be getting like a major skincare campaign at 40? There is hope for us all. But it's a really exciting partnership because I think we share the same values around making better choices for the skin and for the planet, using as many naturally derived ingredients as possible. And the packaging of this range is much more responsible and planet friendly. So it really is a step in the right direction. And every product in the range, it contains no silicons, parabens, mineral oils. It's made with 97 to 99% naturally derived ingredients. So for a major brand like that, I think it's a really positive step in the right direction. And importantly, it's accessible and affordable for people, because sometimes, looking for these sorts of products can be quite challenging, and even working out, which ingredients are natural or not can be tricky. But the packaging on this range is really transparent. So it's really easy for people to see what are the natural ingredients, what are the additional ingredients, and then they can just make a choice that's best and safest for them. So for all those reasons, it was, I partnered with Nivea on this range.
And I think the affordability, like the price point as well, is so important, especially if you've got a larger family. Eating organic is really expensive if you're feeding, 4 or 5 people. So for women to be able to make that choice for their skincare, for that to be affordable, that means a lot, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And they're really good products as well. Like I use the Naturally Good micellar wash with organic aloe vera. That's my cleanser for morning and night. And I just love a good, simple product that does what it says. Like it washes all your makeup off, all the sunscreen. You can do it on your eyes. Like it does it all. And then I follow it with a sensitive day cream, as it's unscented, which is quite important for me. And because I can get sensitivity, the sensitive day cream with the organic chamomile is really nice and soothing for me. And these are products that are, they're under $20, but they're simple and effective, and they're just a part of my routine now.
So tell me, hindsight is obviously a wonderful thing. Looking back now, what would your advice be for women who are pursuing a career in the media, or perhaps wanting to sort of follow in the footsteps of women like you who sort of made it, I guess, in what is a really cutthroat industry?
I would say don't hope for something more than what you're willing to work for it. So I think it's really important that one realizes that you really, no matter what you want to do, I think that to the outside world, things can often look like good luck. But I think hard work plays a really large part. It's really important to be kind and to be, respectful, I think, to the people that have come before you. I worked with so many legends in the newsroom, and I was just always so respectful of the experience that they had and learning from them, and not treading on their toes. I think it's important to have a respect for the people that have so much experience. And I think it's important, especially these days, to be quite creative about it. I mean, in a way, we were lucky back then because there was sort of one path, but I feel like now the media, I mean, gosh, there wasn't even social media when when I was studying.
It's changed the game, hasn't it?
It has changed the game so much, and you have to be able to do so much more. I think that now you need to be able to like self-shoot and, I don't know, like create your own content. And I don't know, I think it's tricky now. Like it's harder. But I would say all of those things are pretty important. And interestingly, I heard Jerry Seinfeld once say, this is really interesting, and I think it applies for all industries. Someone said, what is it that, who makes it in, like, how do the best people make it in Hollywood? Who is it that makes it in Hollywood? He said, it's not the best people that make it in Hollywood. It's the ones that wanted it the most.
Yeah. So true.
So it's like, how much do you really want it, and how hard are you willing to work for it? Because the media industry is cutthroat, and there aren't, like it is one. I think it still is a little bit cutthroat. There aren't that many positions, and there are a lot of people that are wanting to do it.
Well, I mean, how many, when you stepped away from your job in Network 10, how many women would have been, cheering that you'd gone and that there was like this rare opportunity? There would have just been so many women that were, and men after those positions, because in Australia especially, there aren't that many, opportunities like you had at Channel 10 especially.
Oh, for sure. But I think it's great. I think it's great that other, to give somebody else, somebody else gets a chance to do it as well. And I think that, one of the really good things about the way that the media landscape has changed now is that I'm sort of thinking this as I hadn't thought about this until we're having this conversation, but I feel that, there's maybe more opportunity, as in you can sort of be self-made now. Like, you can make your own podcast, you can do your own YouTube channel, you can do your own thing on Instagram. Like, if you are a compelling presenter, if you do your research right, you can create your own content now and be recognized in a way that you probably couldn't before. I mean, maybe arguably it's easier. Like, there are a lot of people whose talents are being unearthed because there's all these platforms for it. And some of these platforms get way more eyeballs than television does now anyway. So
and magazines as well. Like, magazines aren't as popular as they used to be.
Podcasts are probably like they're game changing, I think. Before, if somebody wanted to be an interviewer, there was only like Andrew Denton and Michael Parkinson, right? Now anybody, if you're good, and you can do your own podcast, and you will get and especially now during the pandemic, everybody's got a lot more time. You'll probably get like a celebrity on there if you're lucky, because they're all just sitting at home waiting for someone to call. It's giving people a chance,
It is. I completely agree with everything that you just said. I pursued acting and presenting for many, many years, both here and in America. I'm not seeking the approval of anybody else anymore. And I'm not having to wait for anybody else to give me an opportunity. I'm just creating it myself. And that, I guess, you're so right that is down to social media and
and that's one positive thing about it. And actually, you're right about that's like one bit of advice is like, don't wait for anybody don't wait for the phone to ring. Make your own opportunities, and I think we couldn't do that. We just couldn't really do that before.
So true.
I'd make a video and it would end up in the drawer. What am I going to do? Who's going to watch it? Just mum and dad. Oh God, there was nothing like this back then, was there?
No. So at It's All Her, we're all about making life simpler and better for women.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make your life simpler and better for yourself?
I think prioritizing is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't clutter my life with too much. I believe that you can have it all, but not at the same time. I do believe in decluttering from a work point of view, home, even toxic relationships. Like I'm talking all of it.
Yeah.
And then really prioritizing decisions and the things that we do. So, every time I'm given an opportunity, whatever that is, I think to myself, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And if I say no to this, what am I saying yes to? And I think having children has helped a lot, because every time I do anything, that's time away from them. And they definitely don't need to be with me 24/7. It's not healthy and or anything like that. But I really value the time, especially in early childhood. And I really want to be available to them as much as I can, because I just think that these foundations, when they're so small, are so important in, like anything, in setting them up for later in life. So that's really helped me prioritize. But I don't think one needs to have children, to be able to do that. I think it's just prioritizing yourself, and your wellness and your well-being. So that's a big one, I think, in prioritizing, and just sort of enjoying. I think simplifying life is easier when we sort of take a little bit of a step away from social media as well, because not only is it a bit of a time waster, as we all know, it distracts us from the like our own life. If you're not, like, we're so busy looking at what everybody else is doing,
Comparing.
and comparing, and then suddenly we feel like we need so much more than we actually do. And it makes life a little bit more complex, I think. Whereas if we switch off from that and just look at what we've got, I've always sort of believed that the grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. So just focusing on your own thing, and your own path, and running your own race, I think is a really gentle and kind way to live life. There's a lot of positive in social media for sure. Like, I love the connection. I love the inspiration. There's all these people I wouldn't even know about, and stuff I wouldn't know about if it wasn't for social. But so there is the positive side for sure, but we all know the negative side. And I think it plays a big part, I think, in our, like, mental well-being,
Yeah, especially during a pandemic. There's so many times I've just put down my phone because I just can't deal with it.
No, it's too much, and it's overload. And you know what's interesting? I was speaking to a friend of mine whose great grandmother is nearing 100.
Wow.
And she has been through everything. You can imagine all the wars. She was even a prisoner of war at one stage. And she said this was the worst thing she's been through, right? And we're like, how is that even possible? And she said, because we're bombarded with that message. So back then, say, there may have been one report on the radio, or you would have heard, there would have been an article in a newspaper, right? But then you would have gotten on with your life for the rest of the day. Or you would have heard something on the wireless after dinner, but then for the rest of the day and the next day, you would have just gotten on with your life. Now it's like we are hit with all this information, like, every second of the day.
It's exhausting.
But if you look outside your window, like, life's kind of all right when you look outside the window. You would never know that there's a pandemic. The fact that everything's deserted, but you know what I mean? Like, it's I think it's important to step away from that. I mean, not turn a blind eye, but certainly step away from that a bit.
Yeah. And that also then creates perspective as well, which I think is something we really need in this time as well.
Yes, most definitely. And I think perspective is one of the key things, And that's why it's important to keep talking to our friends and other people. Because I often think a certain thing, and then I'll have a chat to someone and be like, oh, actually, maybe I'm wrong. And it's really good. It's really, like, it's really healthy.
Magdalena, thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week. I've loved talking to you, and hopefully everything opens up and you can get everyone back at your beautiful restaurants, and life will be back to normal soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been the biggest pleasure, and I can't wait for it to open up so you can come up and visit. And I would love to share me with you at one of our restaurants. It would be so nice.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of It's All Her. If you have loved this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen, and we'll be back in your ears next week.